Hey guys, and welcome back to the Dev Marketer channel. I'm your host, J.A. Curtis, but you guys can call me Alex. And in this video, we're going to be talking about an all-new framework called Yarn. Now, you might be wondering, why are we talking about Yarn when this is often like a Laravel related channel, PHP, all that kind of stuff. Well, remember that the goal is to help you grow and learn as a web developer, as an entrepreneur, and you need to be on top of these changing trends. Now, why is Yarn the latest trend? Well, it just came out last week. It is released, been built by Facebook, and it in many ways can replace the NPM package manager. Now, all this might be news and might be foreign to you, but I want to take some time just to kind of walk through what Yarn is, because I think it's something really important that you understand. It's something that we're going to be using on the channel, and it's something that's actually already getting baked into Laravel. If you run a brand new Laravel new project, you're going to start seeing a yarn.lock file, and you're going to want to know what that does exactly. So let's talk about Yarn. It is beneficial to us and to the community. So let's dive in and learn a little bit more about what Yarn is. Okay, so now you might have already heard about Yarn over the past week, and it might just feel like maybe it's the next fancy JavaScript framework or a JavaScript manager that kind of seems to come and go with the changing of the tides. It's something we see a lot, especially in the JavaScript community, things that kind of come and go and just so quickly. It kind of seems like it's a waste of your time to dive into it. However, I truly believe that Yarn is actually different, and it's here to stay. It provides massive benefits to both you, your workflow, and to other even Laravel developers out there, okay? So it's being quickly adopted by Taylor. Basically, the day it came out, Taylor was on top of it, and he's already added it to Laravel New. So if you run a new Laravel package, Laravel New, you're going to start getting a yarn.lock file in there. He's already incorporated it into Forge and some other things. We'll talk about that in a second. But it's something that I guess the Laravel community has really grabbed onto and adopted quickly, and they're kind of throwing NPM to the curb. Okay, now you might wonder what all this is. What's Yarn? What's NPM? What is all of this? For some of you guys that are new out there, it might be confusing. Just stay tuned, and I'm going to go through all of it here in detail so that you understand what this whole thing, this cool thing everyone's talking about called Yarn, is all about. Okay, now Yarn is a package manager. It's a package manager designed for JavaScript packages. Now, most of you guys, since this is a predominantly PHP Laravel type tutorial channel, we use a lot of Composer. So you're probably very, very familiar with Composer. And just think of Yarn as something that's almost identical to Composer. Composer is for PHP what Yarn is for JavaScript, okay? It's a package and dependency manager. It allows us to take all these pre-built packages by other developers and bundle them into our project, okay? It makes it really easy to handle that. As they release updates, we can get those updates. Just kind of all that stuff. That's what Yarn does for JavaScript, just like how Composer works for PHP. So let's take a look real quick at Composer, and we understand Composer already, so let's think how Composer relates to Yarn. All right, so when you have Composer is a program we have installed at the root of our computers, and Composer basically looks into our projects and looks for a composer.json file. So, all right, that composer.json file basically lists all of the packages that we want to use in our project. You can see as in some of our series that we've been doing, we'll use a package and we'll just put it into that composer.json. We run composer install, and now all of a sudden we have access to everything that's inside of that package, right? Well, that's what makes Composer so cool. With that simple line of code, composer install, we can pull all of that package code into our project. And not only that, but we can also pull any of the dependencies, which are other packages that our package might rely on, okay? So sometimes you have a package, you've written this package, well, you require something like maybe Guzzle is a popular dependency. Guzzle allows you to make HTTP requests, commonly like for API requests, and you can make those requests and bring them in. It's super easy to do. And so a lot of packages use Guzzle as a dependency. So Composer kind of manages all those dependencies, make sure you have all the dependencies, make sure you have the correct versions of those dependencies, and takes all that hard work off our shoulders. So when we run Composer install, it's doing all that heavy lifting for us, brings in the code that we need so we don't have to worry about a thing. Okay? That's Composer. All right, now PHP isn't the only language to have one of these package managers. These are very handy to use and very, very popular. Everyone tends to have them. PHP has Composer. There's one called Bower that runs for like web frameworks and stuff like that. Linux has several of them like wget and apt-get. Ruby on Rails has Ruby gems. And then JavaScript has predominantly always used a package manager called NPM, which stands for Node Package Manager. All right. And right now, if you were to download Laravel 5.3, you'll actually have a packages.json file, which is that's the equivalent to composer.json, but it runs on NPM. Okay. So NPM is something we already use in Laravel. We need to run npm install to bring in all of the JavaScript dependencies that Laravel has. And we also need to run Composer install to get all the Composer dependencies, okay? So that's how these two things kind of correlate hand in hand. So now where does Yarn fit into all this? Well, Yarn is the package manager that JavaScript uses. It could replace NPM. Well, the nice thing about Yarn is that it doesn't require all this other fancy new stuff. It actually grabs from the same repository that NPM uses. So any NPM package, you can also use Yarn. You can use Yarn to fetch any NPM package because they use the same repository or registry. So think of the registry just like how PHP uses Packagist. Same thing for NPM. There's the NPM registry. And this is the JavaScript registry. And anyway, Yarn uses the same registry that NPM uses. Okay, so let's see. This is the right one. So now, if we find one on here, let's find, like, for example, Express or Gulp is one that actually we use. Let's find Gulp because Gulp is something we use in Laravel a lot. So here you can find. This is Gulp. This is the package manager we use, or this is a builder system that we use in Laravel. And so Gulp is on the NPM repository. Right now, if you download Laravel, you run npm install, you'll get Gulp. All right, so that's basically what npm does. And now just think of Yarn as a competitor to npm. It's another option on doing it. So now you might wonder, well, if Yarn is doing the same thing that npm is doing, well, then why did we even bother? Why even have two of them? Why is Yarn better than npm, or how are they different? Why would you use Yarn over npm? Well, that's a good question. So Yarn is actually built by Facebook, and here's some. I just pulled some quotes from Facebook's blog post about introducing Yarn, and this is basically why they said they were having problems with npm. This is why Facebook decided to actually to build Yarn in the first place. They were using npm and they ran into some of these problems. They said here, as we scaled internally, we faced problems with consistency when installing dependencies across different machines and users. This is something we'll see with Yarn, that Yarn handles installing dependencies across different machines much better. So when you work as a large team, you can make sure that you're running consistent packages across every machine in your on your team. They also said that the amount of time it took to pull dependencies, it took time to pull dependencies in, and they also had some security concerns with the way that the npm client executed the codes from some of those dependencies automatically. All right, so we had security, we have speed, we have consistency across multiple teams, and then last, we also had to work around issues with npm's shrink wrap feature. Now, this is a feature not a lot of people know exists. It's similar to the composer.lock file. npm can make a shrink wrap, which is similar to composer.lock. You put that up in your repository, and it allows you to run to make sure that everyone's on the same page, everyone's installing the same stuff. They said here the npm's shrink wrap feature, which we use to lock down dependency versions. Now, shrink wrap files aren't generated by default, and so they often fall out of sync if engineers forget to generate them. Okay, so this is another concern that they really were having as they work with a massive team that you can imagine that Facebook is. They had some of these problems, which is why they decided to just build it from the ground up, and that's where Yarn came came in. Okay, so Yarn is built by Facebook, and what I actually want to do here is if you go to Facebook, let's see, it's code.facebook.com. and we look at the Yarn package. I'll link this in the description. You can read more about it. I'm not going to go into tons of detail on it, but it goes into great detail on why they decided to build Yarn, okay? Why they decided to build it instead of just continue to use NPM. It was causing lots of problems for them, and they decided to go through it, all right? So, with that being said, basically, let's see real quick. Let's actually pit these two projects head to head to see where NPM and Yarn differ, where one is better than the other, or where they maybe compete. Now you saw this a little bit when we were looking at the Facebook post, and basically you got to think about that when you're working with large teams, you can often have problems where people are installing different versions of different dependencies. And this is something I've actually seen recently with my team at work. Just this week we had something, and it was with Composer. Someone hadn't installed from composer.lock. We were getting bugs on one computer and not the other, and it was just because we had different versions of Composer. And it's so frustrating to find this because you don't often think about the packages you bring in as causing bugs. So you're often looking at your code, and it can take hours and hours to determine that actually the problem might have been another package that existed. And that's what happened here. Okay, so that's one of the things that's really nice about Yarn over what NPM is able to do. Now, NPM does have a feature that basically addresses this called NPM shrink wrap. And NPM shrink wrap creates a lock file basically, and similar to composer.lock, and that allows basically everybody it can pull from the lock file first when you run npm install, and it'll make sure that it has those versions instead of whatever it decides to do inside of your packages.json. Now, what you're wondering, why I guess isn't packages.json? Why is it maybe grabbing in different versions? Well, it's because packages.json has loose version numbers. It basically accommodates small variations in versions. So basically, if a developer posts another version that fixes a bug, npm or the packages.json allows for npm to use that version. Whereas the lock file is actually something that is saying everyone on the team is using what's in this lock file. So you may still make the decision to update your packages, but at least it needs to be done and then pushed to the repository so that everyone has the exact same versions. Otherwise, depending if someone's a day or two apart when they ran their last npm install, they might have different versions of packages, which could lead to bugs that are difficult to determine. And that's where this yarn.lock file comes in. With yarn.lock, it's automatically created, automatically synchronized. You don't need to remember to run shrink wrap. It's automatically ran, and it always stays in sync, okay? Which is a lot better than having to remember to do the shrink wrap feature with npm. Also, the npm shrink wrap feature does affect speed and reliability, okay? But yarn.lock, the Yarn program is built around yarn.lock. It's always keeping in a sync, and that's one of the primary features of using Yarn. It's built around this concept, okay? So that's one of the biggest things you're going to notice. You're going to start seeing a yarn.lock file, and when you run yarn or yarn install, that you're now going to be pulling from that yarn.lock file so that everyone on your team has the same versions of every single file. Next up is speed. Now, speed's going to be important. One of the reasons that speed is so important is that NPM is notoriously slow, like really slow. In fact, Taylor Otwell, the developer of Laravel, had mentioned recently that he gets people that have slower computers or slower internet connections. NPM can take 5 to 10 minutes sometimes for some of these people to install all their npm packages from a fresh version of Laravel. And he often gets emails about it, people wondering because it will just hang up and break eventually. And so npm is kind of a headache for a lot of developers because it is very, very slow. Now, Yarn has sought to fix that quite a bit. They have several benefits of why you would use where Yarn improves. One of them is that there's a global cache. So whenever Yarn grabs a new package that it was unfamiliar with, Yarn keeps this global cache that basically everyone is sharing, that keeps it up to date as far as what versions are out there. So it doesn't need to go out hunting for it every single time. It basically knows through this global cache, which speeds things up significantly. The other reason that Yarn is a lot faster than NPM is because it can run parallel requests. Basically, it can install multiple packages at the same time, unlike NPM, which has to wait till one package finishes so it can install the next one. Yarn can run them simultaneously, making it much faster at getting the Yarn install complete. Okay, I benchmarked a few of these for you, so let's take a look at the results that I got using Yarn compared to NPM, and then we're going to run it real quick with Laravel. Okay, so let's head back over. And let's, you can see here on the left, I've ran NPM. On the right, I ran Yarn. And we started real quick with the Express web framework. Okay, this is a JavaScript, like minimalist web framework. I can't remember, I think there's about 45 packages pulled in through Express. When we run it with NPM, it takes 9 seconds to complete. So that's not bad at all, right? It's only 9 seconds. However, when you run the exact same thing with Yarn, instead of NPM, it takes a little over 1 second, okay? From 9 seconds down to 1 second. That is so fast, so crazy. You can already see basically where this is going with speed. Now, something we run a lot, I love Gulp as a builder, and if you run Gulp on NPM, it takes about 12.5 seconds to bring in all of the Gulp packages. Now, Gulp's about 195 dependencies, I believe, close to 200 dependencies, and so it's a lot of dependencies. It takes 12 seconds with NPM. When you bring that in with Yarn, it cuts that in almost half, down to 6.3 seconds is what I got on my machine. And for you guys, I have a really fast machine, really fast internet, so I'm going to be getting pretty high speeds. Some of you guys might get, both these numbers might be significantly higher for both of you. So these are kind of best case scenario numbers. People with slower internets and stuff might be looking at 30 seconds to bring in Gulp, whereas cutting it down to Yarn might get them into 12, 15 seconds, which is incredible savings, okay? Last is Laravel. We're going to run this real quick. It's always a little bit different. You never get exactly the same benchmark speed, but when I ran this for benchmark test really quick here, with Laravel, it took a minute. It took 59.8 seconds to be exact, but it took a full minute to bring Laravel in with npm install. Now, when I did the exact same thing using Yarn, it took only 18 seconds. That is incredible savings in time. From a whole minute down to 18 seconds. That alone makes Yarn, just so much better. Now, let's run it real quick. Let's go through, and I'm going to open up the terminal real fast. And let's just make a real screencast one real quick. And let's go ahead and build this. So let's go to our sites folder, and let's do a Laravel new. We're going to create Laravel new, and we're going to run Laravel npm. Okay, now this is just the name of the project. So we're just doing a normal Laravel new. I'm calling the project Laravel npm. All right, we're going to go ahead and craft it real quick. I'm not speeding this up. This is real speed. So you can see basically how fast my computer pulls this all in. Okay, so we're done. That was a Laravel new project. We've got everything in there. Let's go ahead and move into there. So we'll do Laravel-npm. And when you can see if we pull this in, we've got the composer.json. We also have, you can see yarn.lock is now pulled in with a Laravel new, but we're not using that right now. Let's run, let's see, I'm looking for packages.json. Where's that at? Here it is, package.json. So this is the package that npm is going to use, is package.json, all right? So now what we're going to do is I'm going to run npm install. We're going to go ahead and click enter on that. And I am going to probably have to speed this up. So I'm just going to stop talking for a second and speed it up. But I think we can expect this to take about 1 minute. All right, so mine just completed. And it's kind of interesting, actually. It took a little longer than expected. So I've got 1 minute and 20 seconds is what it took. 1 minute and 19.5 seconds. So 1 minute, 20 seconds just ran. This is real world. Just ran it right now. Now, some of the reasons that it maybe affected the speed, npm relies heavily on your processor. If you have a slower processor, these speeds can go up significantly. You could easily be looking at 3, 4, 5 minutes to install this. Now, because I'm running a screencast right now, the screencasting software does eat into the the processor a little bit. So that will mean that there's less processor available for NPM to do its thing, which might be why it took a little bit longer to run than normal. But it took me 1:20 seconds, and I have the proof for you guys right here. So as you can see, 1:20 seconds is what it took, and yeah, that's quite a while. So let's go now. We're gonna actually back out of this. Let's we're going to delete this. So we're gonna do rmr Laravel -npm. Gonna go ahead and kill that. Of course, I guess we don't need to kill it. I just did though. Okay, so now we're going to Laravel new, and let's create a brand new project. We're gonna call it Laravel Yarn, and go ahead and install that project real quick. Now we're gonna run the exact same thing with Yarn and get that up and running and see how long that takes. Okay, so sites, let's cd into Laravel-yarn, and then we're going to run yarn. Okay, now I'm gonna give time just so we time this. I forgot to do that last time. Okay, so time yarn, and you can actually run time yarn install or just yarn, which is what I like about this. So let's go ahead and run this real quick and just see. I'm actually not going to speed this one up because I don't think it'll take very long. So you guys can kind of see how it works. So there you go. That was done. It took only 9 seconds. So this is very interesting because this is actually different than... So it actually took even less time to do run yarn this time than it did on the previous time I benchmarked it. And it took way longer on the other one. So anyway, we're down to 9 seconds is how long it took to run yarn to install all the Laravel dependencies on a fresh install. And then a fresh install with running npm, it took 1:20 seconds, okay? And you saw that right here. This is incredible. The speed alone is reason to switch over to Yarn. So it really is impressive. It's something that's... Yarn is something that alone should solve a lot of the problem. It doesn't eat away at your processor like NPM does. The fans in my computer are still running full blown from the NPM install. And Yarn never causes that. It's much easier on your computer. It's a win-win all the way around. So basically, I think we can easily say that Yarn wins by a landslide when it comes to speed. It is a huge savings in time when you switch over to Yarn. Now, the other thing I want to mention is basically the output. So if we look over here, Yarn versus NPM again, the output looks amazing on Yarn. Now you guys remember seeing this is basically a clean install with Yarn. You can see here that you basically it breaks it down to 4 steps. It resolves the packages to figure out which ones you need. It goes out, gets them, links them all together, builds them, creates the lock file, and you're done. You get these cute little emojis, which is awesome, that kind of seem, it's looking for them, it's fetching them with the truck, it's linking them together, building them as like a little piece of paper, and then magically done. And unfortunately, you poor little Windows users, you don't get the emojis. I guess it doesn't work with the command line in Windows. So the emojis are basically for Mac, but it's a really nice, clean output. You can see what happens. You saw the little status bar and all that kind of stuff. Makes it really easy to use. Now, in contrast, let's go back up and look. This here is all of the, let's see. Okay, that's actually Composer. So all of this here is the npm install. So this is what you get with npm. All of this here came from my npm install. And just look at the way it is. It's so jumbled. It's such a mess. And now you compare that to what we got down here. That was our Yarn install. Okay, so really, really nice. Love the output. Just another reason to go through and use it. Okay, now the last thing we have to ask ourselves is this stable? Can we run this in production? And the question for that is actually pretty simple. First of all, Facebook has been running it in production for quite some time. They mentioned that on their blog post. Okay, so it's stable enough for Facebook. So that alone should tell you that you're probably safe using it. If it's stable enough that Facebook's been using it, then it's got to be stable enough for you guys. Most of us don't have websites that, get the level of traffic that Facebook does. And if your website does, then please let me know, because that means you're either working probably for YouTube or Google. Either way, I'd love to talk to you. So if you're running a website that has more traffic than Facebook, please let me know. You can just go ahead and email me. Okay, so basically it's stable enough for Facebook. So that alone should tell you that it is stable. I will give NPM a little bit of an edge here because you have to admit that NPM's been around for so long that it is stable. Like we know that NPM at least is stable in the fact that it's not going to break your server. However, you have to wonder the level of stress that it puts on my computer when I run npm install on my computer. I know it's got to be doing that onto my server. So when I run my server and I have to max out my CPU on my server, that is concerning. That's something I need to be doing during off hours and stuff like that. Whereas running a yarn install doesn't seem to be a big deal at all. It seems quick, it's fast, and it doesn't use the same CPU levels that NPM is. So this one's almost a toss-up. While I have to argue that NPM's been around for a while, we know it's stable, it's not going to break in production, Yarn doesn't appear to be doing the same thing either. And when you take into account that Yarn is faster and it uses less processor compared to NPM, it makes me question if maybe Yarn is the better choice as far as stability. Now, time will tell as far as stability is concerned. Yarn has only been out about a week, so it's not very much time to basically judge Yarn off of yet, but it seems to be stable, and like I said, Facebook is using it. And one of the reasons that Facebook built it was for security. They were concerned about some of the security of the way that NPM installs its packages. And so that's been built into Yarn from the beginning, and that should be a really nice, comforting thing for us to think about, that Yarn is going to be more secure, which again enhances its ability for being stable for use on production. Okay? So now I think I've convinced you guys that Yarn is the way to go. And I think from now on, you're going to want to be using Yarn in your projects. Now let's talk about how do we install Yarn? How do we get it onto our system? Okay, well, there's several ways that you can do this. In fact, let's go over to the Yarn website, and it's yarnpkg.com, stands for Yarn Package. This is their actual website where you can do this. All right, now this goes into some of the benefits real quick of Yarn. It's ultra fast, it's mega secure, it's mega reliable, and it talks a little bit more why. So if you want to research this a little more, you can get into it. Some stuff I actually forgot to mention. It does have an offline mode, which NPM doesn't have. It has incredible performance. And it has this awesome flat mode as well, which I didn't talk about, that allows you to basically resolve different versions. So you're not copying you don't have multiple versions of the same package. You don't have version 1.2 because that's what one package required, and then you have version 1.7 because that's what a different package required. Now you have two dependencies, two different copies of that dependency, whereas Yarn doesn't do that, which I'm sure also affects its speed and reliability. Okay, so the other thing that I didn't mention was that we talked about using Yarn as a replacement for NPM, but Yarn actually can grab from Bower as well. So any Bower package that you have, you can also use Yarn to get. Now, Bower is a package manager for basically for the web. Okay, so here you can look at some of the browser packages. Think of Bower can install anything like in fact, let's search packages here, but it can do Bootstrap, so you can grab Bootstrap from Bower. Why is this not searching? Well, you can. I don't know why it's not working, but anyway, you can grab Bootstrap from them. You can grab, I think Gulp is on here. Let's check. I know that Foundation is on here. I'm not sure why this search isn't working. Okay, well, I'm not sure, but basically there's lots and lots of packages you can install in here, SAS, and all sorts of stuff like that. So that's all. Compass is on here, Bourbon, I don't know, all sorts of stuff. So you don't need Bower anymore. Yarn can actually replace both NPM and Bower, which is awesome. Just another pro in their column. Okay, so that's everything for NPM. Now, how do we install it? How do we install Yarn? We'll come over here, we'll click Yarn install, and it will walk you through how to install it depending on your system. Now, the one easy way to do it is if you already have NPM, you can come over here to alternatives, and you can actually install it with NPM. So you can do NPM install, you're gonna wanna install it globally, and then just install Yarn, and that will pull it in through NPM, and that'll be the last time you ever have to use NPM, is to install Yarn. Now, if you got a fresh computer, you don't have NPM yet, it's really silly to install NPM just to do Yarn. So the way I actually did it, even though I have NPM, I actually installed it natively onto my computer. I used Homebrew for Mac. So if you are a Mac user, I recommend personally, although you can always use npm to install it, I recommend using Homebrew. So you're just going to want to run a brew update most likely, because Yarn is, in the time I filmed this, it's a week old. So it's very possible if you haven't ran a brew update in the last week, you're going to get an error because Homebrew can't find Yarn. So you're going to want to run brew update, and then after that, you just run brew install Yarn, and you're done. Okay, that's how I installed it. Now Yarn is global on my computer. It's also installed inside of a sandbox, so it's safe. I like installing things through Homebrew if I ever can. That's how I install MySQL, and that's how I've installed basically all the other stuff I use is Homebrew. Okay, so that's how I recommend doing it on Mac, is brew install Yarn. Now, if you're on Windows, you can come over here. There's an installer you can download. You'll download the installer, you'll launch it, and install it that way. And then on Linux, you can use you can use apt-get or wget, depending on your distribution to get it, or you can just pull it in through curl. Either one works. And then you're going to need to mess with your path a little bit just to get that running, okay? So that's how you can install it on the different installations. Once again, I'll throw this up in the description so you guys can find it on how to install it. And if all else fails, you can always install it with npm if you already have npm. Okay, so that's all it takes to install it. Now, once you got it on your computer, all you basically need to do is you can run yarn to run a yarn install. Or if you run yarn -- version, this will just let you know that it's on your computer and it's working. So yarn version, I've got 0.16 right now, and so you know it's working. And if you go into your project, you can just run yarn, and that will install everything for you. Okay? Last, let's talk about how Yarn meets Laravel. Well, we already kind of touched on this real quick, but because of the way Laravel 5.3 is, you now have in fact, let's go into this folder real quick. But the way that Laravel 5.3 is, a lot of packages now need to be installed through the npm registry. Okay, you need this folder package called node modules, and that's what's usually pulled in through npm. But now we can use Yarn to pull that in. Okay, so let's go Laravel Yarn here, and let's pull this in on Atom. I'm going to open up the text editor real quick, and you can see inside of here that we now have this folder called node modules. Inside of node modules, these are all the node modules that we have. There's just so much. It's kind of crazy, to be honest. But this is what's pulled in with a fresh install of Laravel. Now, you probably should, I don't know, mine doesn't appear to have a git ignore. Oh, there it is. Okay, it just hasn't been committed yet. That's why. I haven't initialized it as a Git repository, so it doesn't ignore it yet. But you're going to want to make sure node modules is just like your vendor. You don't want to submit that to git ignore. You want that in a git ignore. You don't want to submit that to GitHub or any repository like that. And so it's already built into our git ignore. All right. Now, one thing you'll see down here at the bottom is yarn.lock. It looks like the Atom images already has a yarn file, which is really cool, for a little image for the yarn file. This is what your yarn.lock file looks like. There's a lot of stuff that comes pre-built with Laravel. Laravel has a lot of stuff it brings in. All right, and so you can see that if you run Laravel new, you're going to get this yarn.lock file. You can run yarn from there. Even if you're not running a newest version of Laravel 5.3, let's say you've updated it, you don't want to run Laravel new, you can still run yarn to do that yarn install, which will then create that yarn.lock file, commit that to your repository, and then the rest of your team can take advantage of the benefits of Yarn. So if you get the rest of your team on board with Yarn, you can stay consistent with those yarn.lock files. That'll help you stay consistent across your team. Okay, so that's basically the way you would use it in Laravel. You would use it just like you would use npm, but you'll just run yarn instead. Now, the commands that you're going to want to know is basically running yarn will do a yarn install. You can see here it's already up to date, but yarn and yarn install are the same. So you can always just run yarn. It'll keep it up to date. That updates your lock file that installs all the packages and everything like that. The other thing you can do is you can update with yarn update. Just like you would a Composer or npm. You can also add a new package. If you're used to Composer, we do Composer require like guzzle http/guzzle, I think it is. And that would bring in now Composer in. It would add it to our Composer file and install it. Well, it's actually way easier. And npm, you do npm install like this, and then you the name of the package. But with Composer, you would, with Yarn, you would just do yarn add and then the package name. Okay, and that's it. And now it'll pull it in just like everything else. The last thing that you guys should know is that Yarn is actually, if you use Laravel Forge to deploy your web servers, Yarn is actually being installed with every new Laravel Forge server that you set up. So if you go to Laravel Forge right now, you set up a brand new server, just like how it installs Redis and it installs Beanstalk and it installs Memcached and all that other stuff, it also goes ahead and installs Yarn. So if you have any Laravel Forge server set up right now, and if it's set up before, you still got to install Yarn. But from now, moving forward, every Laravel Forge server also comes with Yarn installed, and that's going to be the preferred package manager, or JavaScript package manager at least, to use with Laravel Forge, okay? So that's another thing I just wanted to mention, is that if you do use Laravel Forge, you're gonna have Yarn installed on your servers, and you can run Yarn or Yarn install to install things. Of course, you usually don't need to, because the beauty of Forge is that they handle it for you, so you really don't need to run Yarn very often. It'll run it automatically when it deploys your application. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of how you would use Yarn. Obviously, there's more details for this. You can go into detail learning Yarn, but that's basically how it works. Okay, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this. This is a little bit different of a tutorial, I know. Kind of more of a teaching tutorial, but I want you guys to know and understand Yarn. I'm gonna be using Yarn in every future video, so we'll be running Yarn. I'm just gonna run it like it's nothing, and you guys are gonna wanna have watched this video so you kind of know what's going on. I was a little confused when I first saw Yarn, and everyone's talking about it, so I wanted to get you guys understanding what Yarn is and why you're gonna wanna use it. So I highly recommend you go out there, go ahead and install it, and start to learn to use it, okay? Laravel already comes with it pre-built in, so you already have a good excuse to use it. And as you start working with other frameworks, anything that you used to use npm to install, you can now use Yarn to install, which is really, really cool. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this. This was a longer and more detailed tutorial about something kind of generic, but I hope you guys did enjoy this. We still have other tutorials coming up. We're finishing getting started with Git series. I really want people to understand that. There seems a lot of people are emailing me, still don't understand Git, so I want to finish that series, and we will be getting in to the e-commerce series, I promise. It's just a bigger undertaking, so I just haven't had time to start the e-commerce series, but we will do it, I promise, okay? Thanks everybody, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for subscribing. If you haven't, make sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. I really, really appreciate it. And until next time, I'll see you later.